It's a chilly October 30th, 1968, at 21:41 hours, and the quaint town of Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo, California, has just witnessed a heinous crime. A lone figure emerges from the darkness, gun in hand, firing into the air twice before fleeing the scene. The victims, a young couple, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, are leaving a parked car when they're ambushed. Their lives were cut short in an instant, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. This senseless act of violence would go on to become the first in a series of brutal murders. The scene at Blue Rock Springs unfolds like a twisted nightmare, with glass and metal scattered everywhere, a chilling reminder of the violence that occurred in this idyllic spot. The air is thick with an eerie silence as police and forensic experts meticulously gather evidence, documenting each detail in the hopes of unraveling the mystery. Bullet shell casings and bloodstains remain, a haunting testament to the senseless tragedy that befell the Faraday and Jensen families. The smell of gunpowder lingers, a potent reminder of the violence that shook this small town. The trees that lined the parking lot now seem to stand as sentinels, silently witnessing the horror that transpired. As our story unfolds, we find ourselves focusing on the killer, an enigmatic figure whose motives and actions will continue to confound and fascinate us. But let's take a moment to revisit the killer's appearance, the first glimpse of which is etched in the memory of the young couple who survived the attack. The killer's attire was described as a black jacket, possibly a windbreaker, and a hat that cast a shadow over his face. This fleeting moment caught in the eyes of a witness will become the only glimpse of our killer's visage. The details of that first sighting will forever be etched in the memories of those who claim to have seen him. Eyewitnesses described the sound of gunfire, followed by the fleeing figure, which they claim was a man in his mid-30s with a medium build. A bystander claims to have seen the killer jump into a white car, later described as a possible Pontiac, and speed away from the scene. The description of the getaway vehicle will be crucial in the investigation to come. The police are called to the scene, where they find the victims, Faraday, 17, and Jensen, 16, critically injured. Their lives would soon slip away, leaving behind a community shattered by tragedy. The central figure in this notorious case was Arthur Lee Allen, a 32-year-old resident of Vallejo, California. His seemingly ordinary life was a stark contrast to the horrors he would soon unleash on the world. Allen lived with his parents in a modest home, working as a photo developer at a local lab. To his neighbors, he appeared to be a friendly and outgoing man, often seen playing with his dog in the neighborhood. His affable demeanor would later be a key part of the police's investigation. Allen's daily routine consisted of working at the photo lab, attending church services, and socializing with friends and family. His father described him as a good son, always looking out for him. However, some witnesses reported that Allen had a darker side, often yelling at coworkers and displaying erratic behavior. His social life was seemingly normal, but there were whispers of him being a bit of a loner. Neighbors remembered him being friendly, but also slightly odd, often striking up conversations about unusual topics. Despite his questionable behavior, Allen had managed to build a likable reputation in the community. He was well liked at the photo lab, and co-workers described him as a skilled developer. His church attendance and volunteer work also earned him respect from his peers. However, a closer look at his relationships reveals a pattern of manipulation, where he would often use his charm to get what he wanted from others. His ability to blend in with society made him a formidable suspect. Allen's relationships were rooted in a deep-seated need for control and trust. He would often form close bonds with those around him, only to later push them away. His relationships with his family were particularly complicated, with his father struggling to maintain a healthy connection with his son. As the police investigation would reveal, Allen had a habit of forming relationships with women, only to use his charisma to manipulate and control them. The months leading up to the first murders were marked by a growing sense of restlessness within Allen, as if he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On a chilly, moonlit night, December 20, 1968, the small town of Vallejo in Northern California was bathed in darkness, with light fog rolling in from the San Francisco Bay. The temperature was around 55 degrees Fahrenheit and the streets were empty, save for the occasional passing car. Residents were tucked away in their homes, unaware of the horrors that were about to unfold. A killer was on the loose, and he would claim the lives of at least 5 people in the subsequent years. Unbeknownst to the community, a sense of dread was settling over them. The events leading up to this fateful night began with a sense of routine for the couple in their car. David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, had planned a romantic evening out, with David picking up Betty from her home and driving to a secluded spot to watch the stars. They arrived at the head of Blue Rock Springs Park at around 9:45 p.m., in a spot secluded from the public. As they parked, the young couple had no idea that their lives were about to take a terrifying turn. The darkness of the night seemed to loom over them. At around 10 p.m., David and Betty decided to leave the secluded spot and drive down the hill towards Vallejo. As they rounded a curve, shots rang out from the bushes to their left, striking the car with multiple rounds. Betty was hit in the head and chest, while David suffered a gunshot wound to his arm. Panicked and bleeding, David managed to drive his car to the nearest light post, where he stopped and called for help. He then stumbled a short distance to a nearby payphone to place another call, hoping to get some assistance for his dying companion. The most shocking single detail of this crime is the way Betty's body was mutilated in the aftermath. Her body was left on the side of the road with a single word, Vallejo, scrawled above the corpse. The killer's twisted handiwork would leave the community reeling, leaving many to ask, what kind of person could do such a thing? It's a question that would haunt the investigators and the public for the next several years. The gruesome crime scene would set the tone for a series of brutal and seemingly unrelated murders that would continue to plague the region. And it's this investigation that will follow closely, trying to piece together the clues and find the truth behind the Zodiac Killer's horrific crimes. As we delve into the investigation of the Zodiac Killer, it's essential to understand how the police first responded to the series of gruesome murders that began in July 1969. The first reported victim was David Faraday, a 17-year-old high school student who was found shot to death in a car in Vallejo, California. Initially, police believed that the case was a random act of violence, but subsequent murders in the area led them to suspect a serial killer. The police launched an extensive investigation, but it wasn't until a cryptic letter from the killer was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle that they realized the full extent of the threat. This letter would become one of the first crucial pieces of evidence in the case. The key piece of evidence that changed everything was the infamous Z340 cipher sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1969. This cryptic message, consisting of 340 characters, was signed by the killer and became a central focus of the investigation. Cryptographers and codebreakers were brought in to crack the code, but despite significant efforts, the message remained unsolved. The cipher was a game-changer because it showed that the killer was not only intelligent but also calculating, always staying one step ahead of the police. The Z340 cipher remains one of the most infamous unsolved ciphers in history, a testament to the Zodiac Killer's cunning. As the investigation continued, several individuals emerged as main suspects, each with their own compelling theories. One of the most popular theories centered around Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted child molester whose handwriting matched the killer's samples. Allen was interviewed by police multiple times, but he consistently denied any involvement in the murders. Another suspect was Richard Gaikowski, a writer for the San Francisco Chronicle who had been involved in a feud with the newspaper's editor at the time. Despite the suspicions surrounding Gaikowski, neither he nor Allen were ever charged in connection with the Zodiac Killer. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill. One of the biggest mistakes investigators made was pursuing a lead on a man named Ross Sullivan, who had previously confessed to a murder in Marin County. The police became convinced that Sullivan was the Zodiac Killer, and they spent months investigating him. However, as it turned out, Sullivan was simply a disturbed individual who had fabricated his confession. This misdirection wasted months of investigation time and ultimately led the police down a dead-end path. The Sullivan lead was a classic example of a red herring, a false clue that had the police completely off track. Despite this setback, the investigation continued, fueled by the public's outrage and fear. As we conclude our deep dive into the Zodiac Killer case, a stunning revelation has shaken the foundations of this decades-old mystery. The DNA evidence collected from the 340-character Valentine card sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1974 was matched with a suspect in 2002, but in 2018, the DNA results were invalidated, leaving the case still wide open. However, in 2021, a breakthrough discovery was made as a DNA sample from a potential suspect was matched with a sample on the Valentine card. The new DNA evidence came from a sample on the card that had gone unnoticed for years. It belonged to Arthur Lee Allen, an individual already considered a prime suspect. The twist that has everyone talking involves 77-year-old Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted sex offender, who was investigated by police multiple times but never charged due to lack of evidence. Allen's DNA on the Valentine card is a game-changer, but it's essential to note that DNA can migrate, and experts have raised concerns about the reliability of the results. Nevertheless, the police department has confirmed that Allen's DNA is a match for the DNA on the card, which has sparked renewed interest in the case. Allen's DNA was previously matched to the Z340 cipher, which has become a major lead in cracking the cryptogram. Allen was already a suspect in the 1970s but escaped conviction due to a lack of concrete evidence. The 1978 arrest of Richard Gaikowski, a former editor at the San Francisco Chronicle, on suspicion of being the Zodiac Killer, remains a pivotal moment in this case. Despite his arrest, Gaikowski was later released due to a lack of evidence. The case went cold for many years but resurfaced in 2002 when the DNA results were first announced. Today, the Zodiac Killer remains an unsolved case, but investigators continue to work tirelessly to uncover new leads and identify the killer. The case is a tragic reminder that justice can be elusive, even in modern policing. The Zodiac Killer case has left an indelible mark on American true crime history, inspiring countless books, documentaries, and films. The case also brought attention to the challenges of forensic analysis and DNA evidence. Arthur Lee Allen, the suspect whose DNA was matched to the Valentine card, passed away in 1992, taking his secrets to the grave. Arthur Lee's nephew, David, continues to speak out about his uncle's alleged involvement in the case, fueling ongoing debate. As the investigation into the Zodiac Killer continues, one thing is clear: this case has captivated the nation for decades and will remain a topic of fascination for years to come. Now, let's dive into our first debate question: did the Zodiac Killer target specific victims based on their age, or was it pure coincidence that many of the victims were young men? We want to hear from you. Are you Team A, Zodiac Killer had a motive, or Team B, coincidence was the driving force? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Zodiac Killer's identity remains a mystery, but experts have long debated whether the killer's modus operandi was influenced by their psychological profile. Some believe that the Zodiac Killer was a control freak who chose victims that allowed them to exert power and control. Others argue that the Zodiac Killer was driven by a more primal urge and that age was irrelevant to their targeting process. We want to hear your thoughts on this. Are you Team A, Zodiac was all about control, or Team B, it was a raw, instinctual act? If this case gave you chills, hit subscribe. We post a new case every